Jake Morrison sat quietly in the big round room where all the alien species met. The Galactic Council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in circles going up to the ceiling. Strange creatures from dozens of worlds filled those seats. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of crystal, and a few seemed to be made of living light. The air buzzed with clicking, humming, and whistling sounds as the aliens talked in their own languages before the universal translators turned their words into English. Jake wore his best blue diplomatic suit and kept his face calm. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Council for 8 months now. Next to him sat Lisa Carter, a military officer in her crisp uniform. She kept looking at her tablet, reading reports from human space. On Jake's other side, Kevin Price organized papers and files. Kevin was a smart man who studied alien cultures for Earth's government. The three humans looked small compared to most of the aliens around them. But Jake had learned not to show any worry on his face. In this room, showing weakness could be dangerous for all of humanity. A tall, thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms stood up. This was High Counselor Vexathala from the Zephyrian Empire. He was one of the most powerful beings in the Council. When he spoke, his voice came out smooth and cold through the translators. The Council will now hear trade proposals for the next quarter, Vexathala announced. We begin with shipping route adjustments for the outer rim sectors. Jake listened carefully as Vexathala read out the new trade routes. At first, everything sounded normal. Ships would carry goods between different worlds, bringing food to some places and taking metals from others. But Jake had studied these routes for years. Something was wrong. The new routes went around human colonies. They avoided Earth's territory completely. Resources that used to flow through human space were being sent to other paths. It looked like an accident, but Jake knew better. He had seen this pattern before in his diplomatic training. Jake stood up slowly and pressed the button that let him speak to the whole council. High Counselor Vexathala, I have a question about these new routes. Several aliens turned to look at him. Jake could feel their eyes on him, but he kept his voice steady and polite. The Terran Federation notices that these changes will reduce trade through our systems by about 60%. Could you help us understand the reasoning behind this decision? Vexathala's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Jake had learned this meant the alien was either thinking or amused. Ambassador Morrison, surely you understand that trade routes must be optimized for maximum efficiency. These new paths will save time and fuel for all ships involved. Jake pulled out his own tablet and checked the numbers Kevin had prepared. I appreciate the efficiency concerns, High Counselor. However, our calculations show that the new routes will actually add 3 days to most journeys and increase fuel costs by 15%. A few aliens made sounds that the translators could not convert. Jake had learned these were often expressions of surprise or interest. But Vexathala did not seem bothered by the information. Ambassador Morrison, said another alien from across the room. This one looked like it was made of living crystal that changed colors as it spoke. Jake knew this was Counselor Threndok from the Crystalline Consortium. Perhaps the human representative does not fully understand how council decisions are made. Newer members must learn patience while more experienced species guide galactic commerce. The word stung, but Jake kept his diplomatic smile. Of course, Counselor Threndok. The Terran Federation is always eager to learn from our experienced partners. We simply want to make sure we understand how these changes serve the greater good of all council members. Lisa Carter looked up from her tablet and caught Jake's eye. She tapped the screen twice, which was their private signal. Jake glanced down and saw the data she had found. This was not the first time the council had made changes that hurt human interests. Over the past 6 months, there had been 14 different adjustments to trade rules, shipping schedules, and resource allocations. Every single one had made things harder for human colonies. Kevin Price leaned over and whispered very quietly, This is the same pattern we saw in the historical records, Jake. They are testing us. Jake nodded slightly but kept looking at the council members. He had read those same historical records. 47 different species had joined the council over the past 200 years. Each one had faced similar tests. The council would make small changes that seemed reasonable by themselves, but together, These changes would slowly squeeze the new member until they had to choose between leaving the council or accepting whatever terms the older members offered. Most species chose to stay and became what the council called client states. They kept their own governments, but the council controlled their trade, their military, and eventually their laws. The species that refused to accept client status were forced to leave the council. After that, pirates would attack their ships or neighboring empires would take their territory. The council always claimed these attacks were just bad luck. "High Counselor," Jake said, still keeping his voice polite and respectful. "The Terran Federation would like to request a formal review of these routing changes. We believe there may be more efficient alternatives that serve everyone's interests." Vexathala made a sound that came through the translator as a soft laugh. "Of course, Ambassador Morrison. The Council values input from all members. Please submit your concerns through the proper channels, and we will review them according to standard procedures." Jake knew what that meant. Standard procedures would take months. By then, human merchant ships would already be struggling with the new routes. Human colonies would start running short on supplies. Earth's economy would begin to depend more and more on Council goodwill. "Thank you, High Counselor," Jake said. "The Terran Federation appreciates the Council's wisdom and guidance." As Jake sat back down, he noticed that several alien representatives were watching him carefully. Some seemed curious about how the humans would react. Others looked like they were waiting for something. Jake realized they had probably seen this same scene play out dozens of times before with other species. The council meeting continued with other business. New members were introduced, trade disputes were discussed, and scientific discoveries were shared. Jake participated politely in every discussion. He asked thoughtful questions and offered helpful suggestions. To anyone watching, he looked like exactly what the council expected: a respectful representative from a young species learning their place in galactic civilization. But inside, Jake was thinking about those historical records. 47 species had sat in chairs like his. 47 species had faced tests like this. 47 species had tried to be polite and reasonable, while the council slowly tightened the net around them. The difference was that those other species had not known what was happening until it was too late. Jake knew exactly what the council was doing. Earth's government knew. The human military knew. They had all been preparing for this day since before Jake ever set foot in the council chambers. When the meeting ended, Jake walked calmly toward the exit with Lisa and Kevin beside him. His face still showed the same diplomatic smile he had worn all day. But as they reached the door leading to their private quarters, Jake allowed himself one quick look back at the council chamber. The aliens were talking among themselves in small groups, probably discussing the day's business. They looked satisfied, like people who had just completed a routine task. To them, testing the new human members was just another day at work. Jake turned away and walked through the door. In a few hours, he would need to send a report back to Earth. He would have to explain that the Council's testing phase was beginning in earnest. Earth's leaders would want to know how humanity planned to respond. For now, though, Jake Morrison continued to play his role as the polite, patient ambassador from a young species still learning galactic politics. The council members watching him had no idea that humanity had already decided how this particular test was going to end. 3 weeks passed since the trade route meeting, and things got worse for humanity every day. Jake Morrison sat in his office reading reports from human colonies across the galaxy. The news was not good. Captain Roy Henderson from the merchant ship Blue Star had sent a message that morning. His ship carried food supplies to the human colony on New Boston. But when he arrived at Kepler Station to refuel, the alien portmaster told him the station was closed for maintenance. Roy had to fly his ship 3 extra days to find fuel, and by the time he reached New Boston, half the fresh vegetables had spoiled. Similar stories came from a dozen other human captains. Stations that had welcomed human ships for months, suddenly, had new rules. Some required special permits that took weeks to get. Others claimed their docking bays were full, even when human crews could see empty spaces. A few stations simply refused to serve human ships at all, saying they were updating their systems. Lisa Carter knocked on Jake's office door and walked in without waiting for an answer. She carried a thick folder of papers and her face looked angry. "Jake, you need to see this intelligence report. The council is not just making things difficult for our merchants. They are actively working against us." She spread papers across Jake's desk. The documents showed communication records between council species and station managers. The messages were coded, but human intelligence had broken the simple cipher weeks ago. "Look at this one," Lisa said, pointing to a translated message. "High Counselor Vexthala sent direct orders to 12 major trading stations. They are supposed to delay human ships by at least 48 hours and charge extra fees for security inspections. The stations get paid bonuses for every human ship they turn away completely." Jake read through more of the intercepted messages. The pattern was clear and organized. This was not random discrimination by individual station managers. The council leadership was running a coordinated campaign to strangle human trade. Kevin Price entered the office carrying his tablet and looking worried. "Jake, we have a bigger problem. The council just announced new safety regulations for food shipments. They claim there have been contamination issues with agricultural products, so all food deliveries need to go through extended testing." "How extended?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer would be bad. "Minimum 2 weeks per shipment," Kevin replied. "The testing facilities are only located on 3 council worlds, and guess what? None of those worlds are anywhere near human space. Our colonists will start running out of fresh food within a month." Jake stood up and walked to the window of his office. Outside, alien ships moved through the space around the council station. Huge vessels from the Zephyrian Empire carried goods between dozens of worlds. Crystalline ships from Threndok's people sparkled like jewels as they transported rare minerals. Ships from 100 different species went about their business with no delays, no special inspections, and no mysterious maintenance closures. Only human ships faced problems. Only human captains got turned away from stations. Only human colonies had to worry about food shortages because of new safety rules. "They are being very careful about it," Jake said quietly. "Every new rule sounds reasonable by itself. Station maintenance, safety inspections, contamination prevention. If we complain, they can say we are being unreasonable and do not care about galactic safety standards." Lisa sat down in one of Jake's chairs and pulled out another document. "It gets worse, Jake. Our intelligence sources in the council say this is just the beginning. Next week they plan to announce new regulations about colonial governments. They want all council member species to adopt standard administrative practices for their colonies." Kevin looked up from his tablet with alarm. "What kind of administrative practices?" "The kind that put council representatives in charge of local decisions," Lisa answered. "They call it advisory oversight, but the advisors have veto power over any colonial government choice. It means human colonies could not make their own laws anymore." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "How many other species have faced this same progression of restrictions?" Kevin had been researching that exact question for weeks. "All of them, Jake. Every single species that joined the council went through the same process. First, trade restrictions that create economic pressure. Then safety rules that disrupt supply lines to colonies. Finally, administrative oversight that removes local government control." "What happened to the species that refused to accept the administrative oversight?" Jake asked. 16 species accepted it and became client states, Kevin replied. "They kept their own names and flags, but the council controls their trade, their military, and their laws. The other 31 species refused to accept council oversight." "And those 31 species?" Kevin's expression grew dark. "Within 2 years of leaving the council, 28 of them lost territory to pirate attacks or neighboring expansion. The 3 species that survived became isolated and poor. None of them ever recovered their original strength." Lisa leaned forward in her chair. "Jake, the council has been running the same play for 200 years. They find new species, invite them to join, then slowly squeeze them until they have no choice but to submit or leave. Either way, the council wins. They either get a new client state or they eliminate potential competition." Jake walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked at the report spread across its surface. Every document told the same story. Humanity was being systematically weakened and isolated. The council was patient and careful, but they were definitely preparing to force humanity into the same choice that 47 other species had faced. Have either of you noticed something interesting about the council's approach? Jake asked. Lisa and Kevin looked at each other, then back at Jake. What do you mean? Kevin asked. They are assuming we will react the same way those other 47 species reacted, Jake explained. They think we will either submit quietly or leave in defeat, but there is something the council does not know about humanity. What is that? Lisa asked. Jake opened his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope marked with Earth's official government seal. They do not know that we have been expecting this exact scenario since before I ever came to the council. Earth's government has been preparing for this day for over a year. He broke the seal on the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Lisa and Kevin could see it contained a short message and a long authorization code. What does it say? Kevin asked quietly. Jake, read the message aloud. Ambassador Morrison, if the council begins systematic pressure against human interests, you are authorized to implement Response Protocol Alpha. All human forces are standing by for your signal. End message. Lisa's eyes widened. Jake, what is Response Protocol Alpha? Jake folded the message carefully and put it back in the envelope. Response Protocol Alpha is what happens when humanity stops being polite about council membership. He stood up and straightened his diplomatic suit jacket. Kevin, I need you to send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them that the council's testing phase has moved to stage 2, and we are implementing Protocol Alpha as of today. What should I tell Lisa's military command? Kevin asked. Jake looked at Lisa, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. But it was not his usual diplomatic smile. This smile had sharp edges. Tell Admiral Brooks that it is time to show the council what human ships really look like when they are not trying to seem harmless. Lisa stood up quickly. Jake, are you declaring war on the Galactic Council? Not declaring war, Lisa. Jake replied. But I am done pretending that humanity needs the council's permission to exist in this galaxy. The council thinks they are dealing with species number 48 in their standard integration process. They are about to learn that humans do not follow other people's scripts. As Kevin and Lisa left his office to send their messages, Jake sat back down at his desk. Tomorrow, he would attend another council session and listen to more rules designed to squeeze humanity into submission. He would be polite and respectful, just like always. But deep in human space, fleets were moving into position. Defense systems were coming online. Colony worlds were activating protocols that the council knew nothing about. Humanity had spent a year preparing for this moment, and now it was time to show the galaxy what happened when humans stopped asking permission. Jake Morrison walked into the council chamber differently than he had for the past 8 months. His steps were the same measured pace, but something in his bearing had changed. Lisa Carter and Kevin Price walked beside him, and they too seemed different. Gone was the careful deference they had always shown. They moved like people who knew exactly what they were doing. The emergency session had been called by High Counselor Vexathala. The tall blue alien stood at the center of the chamber. His forearms spread wide in what Jake had learned was a gesture of authority among his species. Around the circular room, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations filled their seats. They all looked expectant, like people watching a show they had seen many times before. Ambassador Morrison, Vexathala began, his voice smooth and confident through the universal translator. I trust your government has had sufficient time to review our new administrative oversight requirements for colonial governance. Jake remained standing instead of taking his usual seat. This small change in protocol sent ripples of attention through the alien observers. Many species had never seen a council member break from standard procedures during an official session. Hi, Counselor Vexathala, Jake replied, his voice carrying none of its usual diplomatic softness. Before we discuss your requirements, I believe there are some fundamental misunderstandings that need to be corrected. Several aliens shifted in their seats. The crystalline Counselor Threndock chimed with what Jake had learned indicated surprise. Misunderstandings, Ambassador Morrison? Surely the human representative understands that new council members do not dictate terms to their more experienced partners. The word partners hung in the air, and Jake could hear the mockery behind it. For 8 months he had pretended not to notice such insults. Today was different. "Counselor Threndock," Jake said, turning to face the crystal being directly. "I appreciate your species-long membership in the council. However, I need to address a critical error in the council's understanding of humanity's position." Jake activated his personal communicator, and suddenly the chamber's central display system came alive. Holographic images filled the space above the council floor, showing real-time feeds from across human space. What the aliens saw made many of them lean forward in their seats. Massive human warships moved in perfect formation through space. These were not the small diplomatic vessels or simple cargo ships the council had observed before. These were dreadnoughts the size of small moons, bristling with weapon systems that seemed to bend space around them. Orbital defense platforms came online around human worlds, their energy shields creating aurora-like displays in the void. Colony worlds activated defensive systems that the council had never known existed. "You see," Jake continued, his voice now carrying an undertone that made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably. "The council has been operating under the assumption that humanity joined from a position of weakness, seeking protection and guidance from more advanced civilizations." High Counselor Vexathala's confident posture began to waver as he watched human fleet formations that dwarfed anything in the council's combined military forces. "Ambassador Morrison, what is the meaning of this display?" "The meaning, High Counselor, is simple," Jake replied. "Humanity did not join the council because we needed to. We joined because we believed in the ideals of galactic cooperation and peaceful trade. We allowed ourselves to be tested because we understood that trust must be earned between different species." Kevin Price stepped forward, his academic manner replaced by something much sharper. "Our research teams have documented the integration protocols applied to 47 previous species. 16 submitted to client-state relationships. 31 were forced to leave and subsequently absorbed by council members or their allies." The holographic displays shifted to show intelligence files, communication intercepts, and detailed analysis of the council's methods. Every secret meeting, every coordinated restriction, every planned pressure point was laid bare for all to see. "However," Jake continued, "there appears to be a significant gap in the council's historical data. You have never encountered a species that possessed the capability to resist your integration protocols, but chose not to exercise that capability until now." Lisa Carter activated additional displays showing human intelligence networks that had been monitoring council activities for months. Advanced weapon systems that operated on principles the council's scientists did not recognize. Defensive technologies that seemed to violate known physics. Cloaking systems that had allowed human ships to observe council military exercises without being detected. The revelation hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. For 8 months they had been watching what they thought was a weak new species learning its place. In reality, they had been under observation by a civilization that could have challenged the council's authority at any time. "For 8 months," Jake explained, "we have maintained full military readiness while documenting every attempt at economic manipulation, every strategic disadvantage imposed upon us, and every insult delivered in these chambers. We have recorded 43 separate violations of the Council's own charter regarding fair treatment of member species." Counselor Threndock's crystalline form dimmed noticeably. "The human species was evaluated by our intelligence services. Your technological capabilities were assessed as adequate for a junior member." Kevin Price allowed himself a small smile. "Counselor, your intelligence services observed exactly what we wanted them to observe. Did you really believe that a species capable of reaching your space, establishing 17 colonies across multiple star systems, and creating a stable interstellar government would reveal their true capabilities during first contact negotiations?" The chamber fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Every council species followed the same pattern after joining. Technological development slowed, innovation decreased, military capability became dependent on council resources. This created the economic and strategic dependence that enabled the integration protocols. Humanity chose a different approach, Jake explained. We joined the Council while maintaining independent research programs, autonomous defense capabilities, and self-sufficient resource chains. We observed your methods, documented your procedures, and prepared for this exact moment. High Counselor Vexithala's alien features showed what humans had learned to recognize as deep concern. The predator had suddenly realized it was not dealing with prey. What do you want, Ambassador Morrison? The question carried the weight of centuries of Council dominance. For the first time in the organization's history, a member species was negotiating from a position of strength rather than weakness. Jake's response came without hesitation. What we want, High Counselor, is exactly what we have always wanted. Genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared benefit, fair trade agreements that serve all parties, cultural exchange that preserves the sovereignty of member species, the opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization without surrendering our independence. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. What we will not accept is systematic testing designed to force submission. We will not tolerate economic manipulation disguised as administrative efficiency. We will not submit to colonial oversight that dismantles democratic institutions, and we will not endure being spoken about as if we are not present in these chambers. Counselor Threndock attempted to reassert some authority. And if the Council cannot accommodate these demands? Jake's smile returned, but it bore no resemblance to his former diplomatic expression. Counselor, these are not demands, these are the terms under which humanity will continue its Council membership. If the Council cannot accept equality-based partnership, then humanity will withdraw and establish our own sphere of influence. The threat was clear and unprecedented. Previous species had faced the choice between submission and isolated decline. Humanity was presenting a third option: direct competition with the Council itself. Kevin Price delivered the final piece of information that changed everything. Our intelligence networks indicate that 17 current Council member species would prefer partnership arrangements similar to what humanity is proposing. They have been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the existing system. The message was unmistakable. Humanity was not just threatening to leave the Council, they were offering to fracture it entirely. High Counselor Vexithala looked around the chamber at his fellow counselors, seeing uncertainty and fear. Where confidence had reigned for centuries, the balance of galactic power was shifting before their eyes. Ambassador Morrison, Vexithala said finally, his voice lacking its former authority. Perhaps the Council has allowed tradition to overshadow wisdom. We value strength and diversity among our members. Jake nodded once. High Counselor, I am pleased to hear that acknowledgement. We look forward to beginning genuine negotiations between equals. As Jake finally took his seat, every being in the chamber understood that something fundamental had changed. The age of Council dominance through systematic intimidation was over. The age of negotiated partnership had begun. The silence in the Council chamber lasted almost 2 full minutes. Jake Morrison could hear the hum of life support systems and the quiet clicking of alien breathing apparatus. Every representative in the room stared at the holographic displays, showing human military power that dwarfed their own combined fleets. High Counselor Vexithala was the first to speak, but his voice no longer carried the smooth confidence that had dominated Council sessions for decades. Ambassador Morrison, surely you do not intend to threaten the established order of galactic civilization. Jake's response came immediately, and without any trace of his former diplomatic hesitation. High Counselor, I am not threatening anyone. I am correcting a dangerous misunderstanding that has guided Council policy for the past 8 months. The holographic displays shifted to show detailed intelligence reports, communication intercepts between Council members discussing how to manage the human problem, strategic assessments that labeled humanity as controllable through standard integration protocols, economic projections showing how human resources would be redistributed among established Council powers. For 8 months, Jake continued, this Council has treated humanity as problem number 48 in your standard procedures manual. You have applied the same pressure tactics, the same economic restrictions, and the same administrative demands that you have used on every species that joined before us. Kevin Price activated another set of displays showing the historical pattern. Species after species had faced identical challenges: trade route changes, supply disruptions, safety regulations, and finally administrative oversight demands. The progression was so consistent, it looked like a military campaign. The difference, Jake said, his voice growing stronger, is that those 47 previous species did not know what was happening to them until it was too late. They believed council restrictions were random difficulties or necessary adjustments. They tried to solve each problem individually without seeing the larger pattern. Councillor Threndok's crystalline form had dimmed to barely visible. How long have you known about our integration procedures? Lisa Carter stepped forward, her military bearing now fully visible. Councillor, humanity identified the pattern during our first month of council membership. We recognized it because we have used similar techniques ourselves during negotiations with hostile powers. The only difference is that we apply such methods to enemies, not to potential allies. Several alien representatives made sounds of shock or alarm. The concept that a species might join the council while already understanding and preparing for its integration tactics was completely outside their experience. Every restriction you imposed, Lisa continued, every delay you created, every insult you delivered was documented and analyzed by human intelligence services. We have recorded proof of 43 separate violations of the Council's own charter regarding fair treatment of member species. Jake activated his personal communicator again, and the displays showed real-time communications between human fleets. Massive battleships were moving into positions around key Council systems, not threatening them but demonstrating that humanity could reach any Council world within days if needed. High Councillor Vexathala, Jake said, I want to be absolutely clear about humanity's position. We did not join the Council because we needed protection. We joined because we believed in the principles of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit that the Council claims to represent. He gestured toward the displays showing human military assets. What you see here is not a threat. It is a clarification. Humanity possesses the capability to defend our interests through force if necessary. However, we prefer to resolve conflicts through negotiation between equals. The word equals seemed to echo in the chamber. For 200 years, the Council had operated on the principle that some species were more equal than others. The older, more established civilizations guided and controlled the newer, weaker ones. Jake was proposing something that challenged the fundamental structure of galactic politics. Councillor Threndok made a sound like breaking glass. Ambassador Morrison, what you are suggesting would require complete restructuring of Council operations. The current system has maintained galactic peace for centuries. Kevin Price pulled up historical data on his tablet. Councillor, our analysis suggests that the current system has maintained Council dominance for centuries, not galactic peace. During the past 50 years, there have been 67 armed conflicts between Council members and non-member species. In 41 of those conflicts, the non-member species were former Council members who left under pressure. The implications were staggering. The Council had not been maintaining peace. It had been eliminating competition. Species that refused to accept client status were systematically weakened until they could be absorbed by Council powers or destroyed by pirates who happened to use Council military equipment. Furthermore, Kevin continued, 17 current Council member species have privately indicated they would prefer partnership arrangements similar to what humanity is proposing. They remain in client relationships because they lack the military strength to demand better terms. Jake could see fear spreading through the alien representatives. The Council's power had always depended on the belief that resistance was impossible. If humanity could successfully challenge the system, other species might follow. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had dominated the galaxy for centuries could collapse within years. High Councillor Vexathala attempted to regain control of the situation. Even if what you say is true, Ambassador Morrison, change of this magnitude would require approval from all major Council powers. Such negotiations could take decades. Jake's smile returned, but it was not friendly. High Counselor, you misunderstand. Humanity is not requesting permission to change our relationship with the Council. We are informing you that the change has already occurred. Lisa Carter activated displays showing human intelligence operations. While this council was focused on applying integration pressure to humanity, we were establishing contact with dissatisfied council members, non-aligned species, and even some of your own client states. The balance of galactic power has already shifted. The chamber erupted in alien voices as representatives tried to process what they were hearing. Some species demanded immediate military action against humanity. Others called for emergency sessions to address the crisis. A few began calculating whether their own species might benefit from the changing situation. Bexthala raised all four arms for silence, and gradually the chamber quieted. Ambassador Morrison, what specific terms are you proposing? Jake stood and straightened his jacket. For the first time in 8 months, he looked like what he truly was, the representative of a major galactic power negotiating from a position of strength. The terms are simple, High Counselor. Humanity will remain in the Council under a partnership agreement rather than a membership subordination. We will contribute to galactic security and prosperity in exchange for fair treatment and equal voice in Council decisions. Trade agreements will be negotiated between equals for mutual benefit. He paused, letting the words sink in. Any species that wishes to transition from client status to partnership status will be supported by humanity in that process. The Council's integration protocols will be suspended indefinitely, and Council members will treat each other with the respect due to sovereign civilizations. Counselor Threndok's form brightened slightly. And if the Council cannot accept these terms? Jake's answer came without hesitation. Then humanity will withdraw from the Council and establish the Terran Federation Alliance. We estimate that 23 species would join such an alliance within the first year. The Council would find itself facing organized competition for the first time in its history. The threat was clear and credible. Humanity was not asking for better treatment. They were demanding it, backed by the military power to enforce their demands and the diplomatic network to fracture the Council if necessary. High Counselor Vexithala looked around the chamber one more time, seeing the fear and uncertainty in his fellow counselors' faces. The age of easy dominance was over. The Council could adapt to the new reality or face the consequences of their past actions. Ambassador Morrison, he said finally, the Council agrees to begin formal negotiations on new partnership frameworks. We look forward to productive discussions between equals. 6 months after the day humanity's polite mode turned off, Jake Morrison walked into the Council chamber with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. The huge circular room looked the same, but everything else had changed completely. Alien representatives still filled the seats rising toward the ceiling, but the way they looked at Jake was different now. There was respect instead of condescension, attention instead of dismissal. Jake wore the same blue diplomatic suit he had always preferred, but he no longer needed to carefully control his facial expressions. Lisa Carter and Kevin Price walked beside him, their roles transformed from quiet advisors to acknowledged experts in their fields. The change went much deeper than simple protocol. High Counselor Vexithala called the session to order, his voice professional but lacking the smooth superiority it had carried for decades. The Council recognizes Ambassador Morrison for the quarterly alliance report. The word alliance represented one of the biggest changes. Humanity was no longer a junior member seeking guidance. They were partners in what had become known as the new Council framework, a system based on cooperation rather than domination. Thank you, High Counselor, Jake said, standing with natural confidence. I am pleased to report that Human Council partnerships continue to exceed projected benefits for all participating species. The statistics Jake presented told a remarkable story. Trade between human space and Council worlds had increased by 400%, but now the deals were structured for mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Human colonies reported prosperity levels that exceeded anything they had achieved before joining the Council. Most importantly, 12 former Council client states had successfully transitioned to full partnership status with humanity's support. The economic data showed a pattern that had become the new standard across the galaxy. When species were treated as equals rather than subordinates, their economies grew faster, and their technological development accelerated. The Council's old system of extracting resources from weaker members had actually been holding back galactic civilization. Kevin Price had established the Interspecies Cooperation Institute, replacing the old Cultural Compliance Office. Instead of forcing species to abandon their unique characteristics, the new system celebrated diversity while building bridges between different civilizations. His work had prevented 6 potential conflicts through improved understanding and communication. "High Counselor," Jake continued, "I have additional business to bring before the Council today." Vexthala nodded, a gesture that would have been unthinkable during the old testing period when human concerns were routinely dismissed. The Council recognizes Ambassador Morrison. The Terran Federation has received formal requests from the Kalari Republic and the Vostani Collective regarding transition to full partnership status. Both species wish to end their client relationships and establish equality-based cooperation agreements with the Council. The silence in the chamber was thoughtful rather than tense. The Council faced a choice that would have been impossible. Under the old system, adapt further to the new reality or risk losing more members to humanity's alternative alliance. Counselor Threndok, his crystalline form brighter than it had been in years, spoke first. "The Crystalline Consortium supports reviewing partnership terms for all interested species. Our own trade relationships have grown significantly under equality-based frameworks." Other counselors voiced similar support. The economic and security benefits of the new approach had become impossible to deny. Species that were treated as partners contributed more to galactic civilization than those forced into subordinate roles. Lisa Carter had transitioned from military advisor to Director of Joint Defense Operations. Human fleet assets now participated in Council security missions, but as partners rather than junior members taking orders. The results had been remarkable. Piracy in Council space had dropped by 80%, and no member species had faced territorial challenges since humanity's true capabilities became known. The deterrent effect worked because potential aggressors understood they would face not just the Council's traditional forces, but humanity's advanced military technology and the growing network of species that supported the new partnership model. High Counselor Vexthala made the announcement that formally expanded the changes beyond humanity. The Council hereby establishes the Partnership Transition Committee to evaluate membership terms for all requesting species. Ambassador Morrison, given humanity's experience in this process, would the Terran Federation consider chairing this committee? Jake's acceptance came with characteristic human directness. "High Counselor, humanity would be honored to serve the Council in this capacity." As the session concluded, Kevin Price reviewed data that told the complete story of the transformation. Galactic trade had increased by 60% since the partnership model replaced the client system. Technological advancement had accelerated across all participating species as research programs were shared rather than controlled. Cultural exchange programs had prevented 8 potential conflicts through improved understanding. But the most significant change was in the galaxy beyond the Council. Species that had never considered joining because they feared the integration protocols were now approaching humanity directly. The balance of galactic civilization had shifted toward cooperation rather than domination. That evening, Jake sat in his office recording his personal log. Outside his window, ships from dozens of species moved through space around the Council station. Human vessels worked alongside alien craft in joint operations that would have been impossible under the old system. Today marks the end of the Council's transition period and the beginning of true galactic partnership, Jake recorded. The testing protocols that had dominated Council membership for 2 centuries have been permanently suspended. 17 species have successfully transitioned from client status to full partnership. 9 new species have joined under the equality framework. He paused, considering the journey from that first day when the Council had tried to quietly reroute human trade. Personal note for future ambassadors. Politeness is a diplomatic tool, not a sign of weakness. When other beings mistake courtesy for vulnerability, They learned that humans can be very direct about our expectations. The key is knowing when to be polite and when to be clear about consequences. Jake looked at reports showing the ripple effects across known space. 3 major galactic powers outside the Council had approached humanity about establishing similar partnership agreements. The old system of major civilizations dominating smaller ones was being challenged throughout the galaxy. The Council had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology or military power, though both were impressive. Their real advantage was the ability to choose cooperation while maintaining the strength to demand fair treatment. They offered partnership to those who wanted it and presented clear alternatives to those who preferred the old ways. The galaxy had witnessed the day humanity's polite mode turned off, and in doing so discovered that true strength came not from forcing others to submit, but from building relationships based on mutual respect and shared benefit. The age of galactic hierarchy was ending. The age of interstellar partnership had begun, and humanity had shown the way forward. The council chamber where Jake had once sat quietly while being tested now hosted genuine discussions between equals, working together to build a better future for all species. The most remarkable part was how simple the solution had been. All it took was one species with the strength to demand fair treatment and the wisdom to offer the same to others. The galaxy was a better place because humanity had chosen to turn off their polite mode at exactly the right moment.